Hello once again, friends. It's Dr. Carol, and this is Relationship Prescriptions. Thank you for joining me. I truly have something special for you today. If you know anything about Christian music, you probably know Russ Taff. He's a Christian music icon and has been around for a long time, but you probably don't know his story like you're going to hear it today. Russ and his wife, Tori, are releasing a book today. If you're listening to this when this podcast first comes out, I Still Believe, a memoir of wreckage, recovery, and relentless love. In this book, Russ and Tori open up about their life, from Russ's very abusive childhood to their journey through the music industry, through alcoholism and addiction, a lot of trauma, and restoration. Russ has been at the top of the music industry. He's won 6 Grammys, 18 Dove Awards. He's been inducted into the Christian Music Hall of Fame. I have been blessed by a number of his songs over the years, but this story will truly move you. This is from the introduction to their book, I Still Believe. Quotes, "Being told to pray more, memorize more verses, or attend more church services may be well-meaning advice, but it usually just drives people farther into the shadows. And to the person in a relationship with someone trapped in addiction, please know that as much as you want to, you cannot save your loved one from themselves. That's God's job." That's just a sentence or two from the opening to this book and to the story. This episode is a little longer than usual, but it's worth it, and I hope you take the time to listen. If you are struggling with addiction, this will bless you. If you love someone who's struggling with addiction, this will bless you. We all need the grace of God. And I pray that this story of Russ and Tori's journey and the redemption and grace that they have experienced will bless you. Here's my interview with Russ and Tori Taff.
Praise the Lord, He will work through those who praise Him. Praise the Lord.
Well, Russ and Tori Taff, it is really an honor to have the two of you on our program today. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for asking. We appreciate it.
Russ and Tori, your story is truly an amazing study in contrast. You've been at the very top of the music industry, the Christian Music Hall of Fame. I personally have been blessed by some of your songs, Russ, including Sail On, We Will Stand, and Praise the Lord. Maybe that says something about how old I am.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm proud of those songs.
Rightfully so. But you have also experienced some of the darkest pain and brokenness around alcohol addiction and everything around that. Where you are now is truly a testament to the grace of God. There's a theme in your book, I Still Believe, that I'd like to kind of start talking about, and that's the theme of hiding. Russ, you learned to hide very early, and let us know just a little bit about how that came to be such a painful and core part of your story.
Well, growing up in a Pentecostal preacher's home that preached a hard gospel that he couldn't even live up to, and was preached fear, just a lot of fear. And if you miss one night at church, my aunt or somebody else would what's going on? Have you backslid? But it was all based on works. Everything was based on works.
Yeah.
And I had a great example because my dad is a Pentecostal preacher, but he's also an alcoholic. And at a very early age, I watched him begin to hide and lie, and try to maneuver people to blame them for his addiction. But I watched him hide. And I remember when I was 9 years old, and you can't talk outside the family. You just can't. one of the worst beatings I ever got was I was 9 years old, and I told my little friend, Mom and Dad had an argument. And my older brother heard me and went home and told Mom. And when I got home, she was waiting for me.
Oh, my.
And, started slapping me in the face. And then she started punching me. And I wound up in a corner, balled up with her, kicking and screaming, "You don't tell anybody what goes on in this family. You don't tell anybody what goes on in this family." And
that'll teach you how to hide.
Wow, yes.
But you can't, if you let anybody know what's going on, they'll judge you. And so you have to hide and hold up this image that they all love. But you behind it is not getting any love or support at all. Everybody's loving this image. And, "Oh, isn't Russ great? Oh, isn't Russ great?" And I had years of pain, just so much pain around the church, around Christian people that,
Trauma.
Oh, the trauma of my childhood, being beaten like that. And by the time I was 12, they voted Daddy out of the church. But, and Mom made me go down there and listen. And so I cried through the whole thing and went back and told her.
It was the meeting that they were voting him out.
Voting Dad out. And there were some horrible things about my dad, who I loved. And then also I despised him for his weakness. And so I don't know, it was like, you don't tell anybody what's going on. And by the time I was 13 and my gifts started developing, my dad had to be the center of attention. And so as I would do good and sing in church and do good, it would make him jealous. Mm. And he would emotionally kind of punish me for a couple of days just not talking to me. And so the Holy Spirit's trying to teach you to sing, and but you're going to get clobbered by your dad as soon as you do.
Well, Russ, that must have been, I would imagine, a bit confusing too, because here, the church, you were hearing all this stuff about Jesus, and I'm sure something in there, God is love, but then the way your dad and other Christian people were acting, that must have been a real huge disconnect too, confusing with all that God talk and all that trauma.
Right. And to stand, and it started when I was 7. Wow. He would stand in church and preach a hard gospel. It's like, we're not doing enough. We got to do more. But he never told us how. That was his theme. You got to do more. You got to do more. And then 5 months later, he's laying drunk and doing exactly what he was telling the people not to do. So there was just that. And he never sobered up. Until the day he died. He would get a couple of months, maybe half a year, or one time even a year, and then relapsed. But he struggled with it, but he wouldn't get help because he was afraid if he would go to an AA meeting or a 12-step group that they would recognize him and then start, gossiping about him all over town. So he got no help at all for his addiction, but he blamed other people for it.
And I understand you had to leave the church when he was voted out, that you were told you couldn't come back.
Right. My deal was I couldn't play sports. I was too short and slow. And I tried, I tried, but what I learned to do early is to sing. And I remember getting, being young and learning how to play the guitar when I was 11, and Dottie Rambo songs were real easy to learn. Key-wise, most of them are like 3 chords. And so I would learn a song and I would go down there, and, you got 20 people or 25 people in the church, and there's always time. And I would sing, I'd play my guitar and sing. And that was my deal. During the week, I'd learn a song and learn how to play it and then go sing. But when they threw my daddy out at 12, I didn't do anything wrong. And so I got my little cardboard case with my guitar and headed to the church. And when I was about to walk in, my uncle stopped me, and he had taken over from my dad. And he asked me, he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, Uncle, I've come here to sing." And he goes, your dad's not welcome and you're not welcome either.
Oh,
and
my.
I had to turn around and walk back home and cry, just like, and I told him, I said, oh, Kenneth, I didn't do anything wrong, nothing. And he said, I know, but you're related to him and we don't want you here.
Oh, wow.
So that was just such a knife in the gut with, Christians and what they will do to you.
Yeah.
So there again, you don't tell anybody what's going on. They will judge you. They will throw you out. And even associated shame, you're punished. So it was a rough deal.
And a strong, strong message for a young boy.
But somehow, Russ, you didn't walk away from God completely. When you and Tori met, I understand you were singing gospel music, and that was part of your life. Something must have kept you connected there to Jesus and the gospel in some part of your soul. And that's part of your story that amazes me.
Well, it started when they threw Daddy out, like 12, 13 years old, something like that. And when there's trauma in the home or addiction in the home, everybody loses touch with everybody else. And Mom was so focused in on Dad, and Dad was just so focused in on drinking. You could stay out till 5 a.m. and nobody cared because they weren't checking up on you. They were just in the middle of their drama and trauma. But Mom had a key. Well, let me back up just a little bit. And it's because it started when I was about that same age, 11, 12 through there, that they call it covert incest. And it's not physical touching, but they take a child like a spouse to talk to. And it started when I was 11, 12 years old that, you can't talk outside the family. I got the crap beat out of me for doing that. Well, Mama was under the same restriction, but she needed to talk. And so she chose me. And she would come in after, we all were in bed, and she'd come to my bedroom, and I have to sit up on the edge of the bed. And her just began to dump on me about, we're probably going to lose the house. Daddy can't stay sober enough, and I can't, pay the bills with my salary, and would dump all this stuff on me. And when you're 11, 12, you have no tools, nothing to deal with something like that. And it terrified me, absolutely terrified me, the things that she would bring to my bedroom to get off of her chest. And she would leave the bedroom feeling great. And, she was able to talk it out. Well, I couldn't talk to anybody, but I had heard that through the years until I was like 12, that age right there, that you could talk to Jesus. You could talk to Jesus. And so my only outlet was, Mom had a key to the church, and I'd sneak down there about 11 o'clock when everybody was gone from the church. And I would go in the dark and feel my way to the front. And there was a little table with a lamp. And I would turn that lamp on so nobody could see lights on in the building. And I would go sometimes kneel at the altar, sometimes sit on the altar, and I talked to Jesus. And I told him how scared I was. And I told him that I don't know what to do. And I would cry and talk with him. But after the first time, I felt better. And so as Mama would dump on me, and I can't talk to anybody with flesh on their body, but I could go down to that church night after night after night and tell Jesus.
Wow.
How scared I was. And it developed a bond between he and I.
Yes. Jesus
and I, that was real, very real. Because I was talking to him, not like a prayer, but I mean, just talking to him like you're in a therapist's office. And, I'm sharing all this stuff. And there were times that I felt him close, and at times I felt like I'm not abandoned. So,
and it got you through. It somehow got you through.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
You developed your music career took off, and there's so much we could talk about. But you joined the Imperials for a time. You had a great solo career. You were in the Gaither Vocal Band. You and Tori were traveling around the world at the height of your career. But like with your daddy, alcohol grabbed you. Tori, what was it like to watch Russ get into the hold of alcohol? That must have been just horrible for you as a wife.
Can I have 30, 40 seconds to set this up?
Sure.
Okay, I never drank because of my dad. And here in Nashville, there is social drinking with Christians. And nobody, it's between them and God. And I would, like go to dinner with my pastor, and he'd have a glass of wine with dinner. And so to me, it wasn't like, I just never did it because of dad. And so as I, got into my, the Imperials and, trying to deal with all of this stuff. And, I had been in clinical depression most of my life. But we were in New York, Tori and I. She was visiting her brother, my brother-in-law, that played oboe for the New York Philharmonic, and an amazing musician. And I'd never been to New York. And I always drank Coke. But we were on the 5th floor of this apartment building in July, and it was hot as it could be. But there were 3 Heinekens in the refrigerator, and everybody around me didn't have a problem. I could be out on the golf courses, and one of my buddy would, after we'd finish up, have a beer. I just never did. But that day, and I got to tell you, there were voices in my head. I grew up with constant. You're not worth the bullet they shoot you with. You're not worth the salt that goes on your bread, and you'll never amount to anything. Mm. And when I left home at 17, because I couldn't live in that system anymore, my dad looked at me and goes, "You'll never make it. You won't make it." So I'm carrying all of those voices in my head, winning Grammys and not feeling you're not worth anything. And, you're going to be found out, that they're going to find out about your home and your dad, and that you're not well, you're not good, because you're caught up in all this chaos. So here I am in New York, and hadn't started the therapy yet. And there were 3 Heinekens in the refrigerator. And I thought, well, I'll just drink one of those. I didn't even want it, but drink one of those and see if it will help, cool me down a little bit. And so I had 1 Heineken. And within about 5-6 minutes, I started feeling something.
Yeah.
And so I immediately had another one. And then I had the 3rd. And by that time, all of those voices got quiet. And I actually began to praise God. I can live this way. There's no more accusing voices in my head. That accuser is gone, and I can accept myself. And the next day I was praising God because all of those voices were silenced.
It was a wonder drug.
It was a wonder drug, but I didn't know how it was going to turn on me. But anyway, that's what started my drinking career, and I'll turn it over to Tori.
No, good for clarifying that, Russ. Yeah. Tori, what did you see happening?
Well, that was the maddening part. I didn't see. Russ, as you talked about from the beginning, he learned early on that you needed to hide the parts of you that you didn't think people would accept. And even though he was thrilled with the fact that this introducing alcohol into his life was able to calm and tranquilize him enough that the voices would be still, and he knew instinctively that I probably were not going to be as excited about it as he was. And he would have been right. So along with the first onset of any kind of drinking came the hiding. So as this progressed, it's interesting. As soon as he started drinking alcoholically, which means you drink for the feeling. You don't have a nice glass of wine. You drink 3 Heineken in a row and you hide it and you get rid of the bottles. So that's how alcoholics drink, and you drink alone. The very next night in New York, we went to see a play on Broadway. We went to see Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And Russ excused himself as soon as we sat down because he had seen a bar in the lobby of the theater.
But I didn't tell you. I tell you, I was going to the bathroom.
Exactly.
Hiding right then.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's the day after alcohol was introduced into his life. So the long story short with that one, he was able to pound down about 2 or 3 drinks when he told me he was going to the bathroom. And I always think on the way home, on the subway, I was chattering away about how great the show was, and Russ doesn't really remember how we got home. But what he did, the hiding, he was an expert at it early on. And any addict worth their salt knows how to emotionally knock someone else off balance to keep them from finding out, and also learns very easily how to hide and lie. Addiction has to, in most cases, before people end up under a bridge, there was a period of time where they were learning to hide and disguise their drinking because they figure out that they drink differently than some of the people around them. And so Russ had been diagnosed with depression. So I felt him slipping away from me, but I didn't see, he had told me horrible stories of what it was like finding his father in different stages of drunkenness and passing out and all kinds of horrible pictures in his head. That's what I thought it would look like if someone I loved was drinking. I didn't see any of that. He didn't pass out on my couch. He didn't throw up on my shoes. He didn't come weaving through the door. He didn't get a DUI. He just isolated more and more and more. So what his alcoholism early on, and actually for a couple of decades, even after I knew he was an alcoholic and he went to treatment and had 10 years sobriety, relapsed, went to treatment again.
When my daddy died.
It wasn't until...
Yes. I wanted the pain to go away quick. And the only way I knew was to just numb myself. And I relapsed after 10 years.
And it wasn't until the very last treatment and when he was finally treated for trauma, that was the first time I had ever actively seen him impaired and under the influence. And it was horrible.
I just like to jump ahead to that moment because in reading your book, that just grabbed my heart in such a big way. Russ, you'd had long periods of sobriety, like you said, and Tori, you watched him in and out, and your music was still going well, but there was a time when everything collapsed. And Russ, the timeless taping, maybe you can just encapsulate what that huge crash was like.
Well, the therapist told me, and Tori and I were seeing the counselor, and she said, and if you don't get treated for that trauma in your life, you'll never sober up, because every time, Mama died and I relapsed, and so I hit bottom pretty much. I did something I swore I never do, but I walked on stage drunk.
Wow.
And it was a video that they were putting together to be released, and I'm impaired. And I walk on stage thinking I'm okay, but I wasn't. And, Dan Postema, who's a dear friend, he was producing the show. His wife, he walked me off stage and back to the dressing room, and his wife was there waiting for me, Sarah, and they drove me home. And that was, it hit so hard, because I did something I swore I'd never do, and I did it. And I hit bottom, and that was one of the things that got me sober for 10 years. Or 9 years, I get them all mixed up, but just the trauma of, oh my God, I said I would not do that. And I had this red line that I will not cross, because I would do my best not to drink before a concert, even though my body was screaming for it, because I didn't want promoters and pastors smelling my breath. But I'd always have it back in the hotel room waiting for me. So as soon as I walked in the door off the stage, and the runner would take me back to the hotel, it would be there waiting for me. But you do things that, because when you drink, it puts your conscience to sleep. It does. It just puts your conscience to sleep. And you would do things that you would never do sober. But
and alcoholism,
go ahead.
Alcoholism lies to you. It tells you you're fine when you're not fine. It's the disease that tells you don't have a disease.
Yeah, you can drive. You can drive. And that's why there's so many people that are killed by drunk drivers. And I'm so grateful to God that somehow I was protected, because there were times I did drive drunk thinking I was okay.
And when he walked out on stage, he thought he was okay.
Wow.
But my mother had died, and I'd relapsed. But it was
horrible.
I mean, that wrecked me. I mean, it just broke my heart. But I think if I can continue here, the worst thing that could happen to me, and I was afraid of, was Tori leaving, because she was my last thread of sanity and not getting sucked back into the chaos of my family. And every one of my brothers have faced addiction, and it's taken some of them out, but every one of them has struggled with addiction. And I had my older brother died last week.
Wow.
From alcohol, created sickness.
Body shut down.
Yeah, his body just started shutting down, and he wouldn't stop drinking. So, but what held me, and I would listen to Tori because I was terrified that she would leave. And I didn't know what to do. I knew I was incredibly out of control, but she was my last little thread connection to sanity. But when she said, I'm not going to stay in this anymore, I mean, it scared me so bad. Go ahead, Tori.
Well, that's kind of it. That night was a huge turning point. And I was at the point that I thought, we've lost him. And they got him to, the therapist had been working, it's like trying to coax a deer out of the woods, trying to gently get him into trauma treatment. She said, you know how to be sober. You've been sober for 10 years at a time. What you are is a child of trauma that has never been successfully treated. And I didn't really understand it. Russ didn't either. It was sort of like we all knew he had a horrible childhood. This was not news to anybody. I could recite the stories, as well as he could. And sometimes with addiction, you can use all of that background to turn into self-pity to keep you drunk. And so after the Timeless fiasco and Russ climbed out a window and left, we had about 24 hours where I didn't know where he was. I didn't know if he was alive or dead, and tracked him down and brought him home. He went to treatment the next day, did another 30 days. But when he came out of treatment, the shame of that was his third in treatment for alcohol. And the shame of what he had done to himself and others overwhelmed him.
And how much money I had cost this producer to put this video together. And we were going to end the night with Praise the Lord. Mm. And it was going to be the big moment, the finale. And I'm too drunk to sing.
And when he relapsed after the last treatment, I was done. And I just started making plans and thinking what I'm going to need to do to take care of myself.
You'd seen a lawyer.
Yeah, I did. I had seen an attorney, and I had started making plans. And the therapist said, there is a place. It's a treatment center in one sense, but they treat trauma and among other things, but they specialized in trauma. And this was 12 whatever years ago. So this type of treatment was not new, but it was just kind of beginning to gain momentum with addiction. They were drawing direct lines from childhood trauma to adult addiction. And they weren't saying, oh, you had a bad childhood, so you drink to forget. They were saying when you grow up in trauma, your brain gets rewired. It's like a PTSD thing. It's like you're coming home from Vietnam. You take a nice 18-year-old boy and you stick them in Vietnam or stick them in Afghanistan, and they're exposed to things that they have never seen, and they are living in a fight or flight, adrenaline-fueled life for an extended period of time. And it produces what they call the dark side of adrenaline is cortisol. It's a stress hormone. It affects you on a chemical, physical level. And when your brain is developing and you're a young boy and you are marinating in that, it rewires you. And so one of the things they did is that they took him down experientially. They took him down into the trauma. They went back to the very first memories. They went back to the earliest things he could remember, the worst trauma, the worst pain, the worst scenarios, and they pulled it up and they walked him through it. And his therapist there at the treatment center, this was in Santa Fe, right outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I'd like to point out it was not a Christian, quote unquote, treatment center. Mm-hmm. But because the therapist we've been working with for so long, Deb Leinert, she knew us inside out. So when she was arranging for Russ to be sent there, she told them, you need to get somebody with him because it's a very low ratio of therapists it's very intensive. So there's not a lot of patients and there's a lot of therapists. She said, you need to get someone who shares his belief system, because if you don't come at this through his faith, you're not going to reach him. So they handpicked a young man named Jason, who we will be forever grateful to. And Jason understood. He grew up in not an identical situation, but enough similarity that he understood. And they would have him draw. The first time they were getting ready to do this kind of therapy, they had him draw a picture. They said, draw a picture of your higher power, which is a term they use in 12-step a lot.
Right.
And so he said, that's Jesus. And he said, draw a picture. So Russ drew a picture of Jesus standing with his hands on Russ's shoulders. And the day they started that therapy, they said, bring Jesus with you. You're going to need him. And every day he would show up and they would start this process, and it was
like this big pile of mess. And it was overpowering to even look at it. It was just so monumental. I mean, it was huge. But they started taking one piece at a time,
sorting it through.
And helping me let go of it. But go ahead, Tori.
Yeah, it sounds kind of therapy speak, mumbo jumbo or trendy. It actually was the hand of God in our life. It was absolutely, God created the two of us. He knows our innermost being. He knew what needed to be healed more than we did. He used this therapist, that therapist, this treatment center, this method of treatment. And it broke it. It broke the back of the addiction. It broke the back of the generational curse, if you will.
Yes. Russ, I remember reading in your book, you said, I can think about my childhood today and I don't hurt. I can think about my childhood and I'm not angry. Big change for you.
Oh, my Lord. My Lord. Tori watched me for years. I would tell stories and I would make them kind of funny. Like, can you believe that happened to me? But behind that, there was this anger
and pain.
Yeah.
And I did not know. And we did see Christian counselors. We did. But I wanted to go meet a counselor that wasn't really involved in Christianity, in the sense of, like, I was afraid I would be judged if I went to a Bible-toting therapist
or a pastoral counselor.
Yeah, they would recognize me and be disappointed in me, and I didn't know what to do with that, and I hadn't gotten to a place that I could get honest, really honest.
And our therapist does share our belief system, but her shingle does not say Christian counselor. And again, that's neither here nor there. Good counseling is good counseling. I just don't think it has to necessarily have a title to it. I think that if you're praying and seeking God and asking him to lead you to the next right step, then that step will appear. And it had a lot of different faces in our case. And every one of them were a step towards healing.
There's one more point in your story that when I was reading, I started to cry. And Russ, that's the point when you were asked to visit a dying pastor, dying of cancer in the hospital. He loved your music and you were going to go sing him a couple songs. But something happened there. And I started to cry when I read that part of your story. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I had gotten out of the Life Healing Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I left there. When I left there, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter and down underneath all of that, feeling just completely not worth anything.
Yeah.
Because I knew how to live in chaos. I did. I grew up in that, but I didn't know how to live peacefully. That was brand new to me. And there were times in our marriage I would stir up things because I didn't know how to live in that. But anyway, I'd gotten out of a Life Healing Center, and I don't remember how long it was, 6 months, 8 months, something like that.
Yeah, about 6 months, I think.
And Mark Lowry always has about 5 artists with their spouses, and we all know each other and are close. And we get together in Houston, and it's just fun, laugh. We all know each other, and we tell, funny stories and what we've learned, what Jesus has taught us this year. But when Mark's best friend asked me to go, that was her pastor. And so I took my acoustic. I thought, well, I'll just sing him some songs. They said that he loved the DVD that Bill Gates did on me, and that he would sit and watch it and sometimes cry just worshiping. And they said it would be just such a grand thing
to surprise him.
To surprise him with you. And so I went. And when one of his son stopped me at the door and told me kind of what was going on. And when I walked in the door, I froze. I actually froze because he looked so much like my dad.
Wow.
With salt and pepper gray hair, big hands. Dad was 6'2", and Pastor Jones was about that same height.
Blue eyes.
Big hands, blue eyes like my dad. And it was
shape
freaky.
Of his face, yeah.
It was just freaky. And on the documentary, you hear me say, "Man, you look like my dad," because they videotaped a lot of that just for keepsake.
Sure.
But I immediately knee jerk. I wanted to run because that's what I'd done my whole life. But when you're a professional at things, you suck up and do it. There's times I've walked on stage with 103 fever because, you just have to go. They bought tickets. And so I had my acoustic. I walked in there, and when Pastor Jones saw me, he lifted his hands and he goes, oh, Russ, and tears started running down his face. And I went over to him and hugged me, and he kissed me on the cheek. Dad always did that. The Pentecostals that I grew up with is, greet your brother with a holy kiss. And they did on the cheek. And that was freaky that he would do that because nobody had done that since I'd left home. And I began to sing, what do you want to hear, Pastor Jones? And he would say, oh, Heartbreak Ridge. And so I would sing that for him. And what now? Oh, say, but I'm glad, that old hymn. And after about 45 minutes of laughing and talking, and his wife kind of signaled saying, he's getting tired. He's getting tired. We need to, cut this off so he can go to bed. But what shocked me, the first thing he said to me after he threw up his hands crying, I went over to him and he kissed me on the cheeks. And he said, Russ, I've taught my boys how to live. And both of them were pastors underneath him. He said, I've taught my boys how to live. And if God doesn't heal me, I'm going to teach my boys how to die. And such a father. Such a father. It wasn't about, his thing. It was about his kids, and that he teach them even when he's going out, when he's crossing over, he's still teaching them.
That's a father's heart.
Oh, man. A real father's heart. And so he asked me to pray for him
when you're leaving.
When I was leaving, and I felt so inadequate. Here's a guy that's, to me, he's a prophet. He's been in this area for 44 years, marrying people, burying people, built this church that was huge, and I mumbled something. I don't know what it was. I just felt so inadequate to pray, and I just said something, and And I turned to leave, but I stopped and I said this, and I wanted to reach out and take it back so bad. But I said, Pastor Jones, would you pray for me? And he goes, oh, Russ, I'd love to. And he stands up.
Oh.
And he puts his hands on my shoulders and he's looking down into my eyes. And I'm looking up into my Father's eyes.
Wow.
And he starts praying. And now he had just met me. He didn't know my life. He didn't know my story.
No.
He didn't know what I'd just been through. But real pastors have a sixth sense.
Mm-hmm.
They can read things that I don't think normal lay people in the church can do.
Yeah.
But I began to cry. And he continued starting to affirm me, saying, Russ, God is so pleased with what you've done with your life and how you've given your talent to him. And I collapsed to my knees and I began to cry harder. And he pulled my head to his belly and he began to stroke my hair. And he began to affirm me, you know, you're a good man, you know, you have the Father's heart in you. And the more he affirmed me, the harder I cried. But when I left there, I was a different person. I wasn't this, you know, guy that had been a victim most of his life, you know, the only role I know how to play. But I walked in there as a guy trying to figure out what manhood was. But I walked out of there a man.
Yes.
You know, that Dad had affirmed me, and it changed me. It changed me. And I mean, the rest of the day, I was just thinking, my Lord, how long did you have this plan, God?
Decades? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to go pray for this pastor that might be dying. And, you know, you had this ordained years before I even showed up here. What to do, but it changed me. And when I got back to Mark's place, I began to tell them what happened, and everybody started crying because they knew my story and they knew how strong this was toward my healing. But it was, I don't know, it was a powerful moment. Go ahead, Tori.
Reba Rambo McGuire was one of the friends, one of the artists that was there. And she was crying and she said, you know what my mom Dottie used to call it? And I said, what? And she said, that's not the Holy Spirit, that's the Holy Sneaky.
Oh, that's so good.
I wanted Tori to just comment just 1 second. She had seen a lawyer and I had lied so much covering up my addiction. But she, after the last one, she decided to stay because when I went to Santa Fe, it was iffy. You know, it could have gone either way. And I knew if I was going to do this, it would have to be for me because there's a good chance when I get back, she may not be there. But tell her your thought process and why you stayed.
My goal in all of this, before I knew what the enemy was, before alcoholism had a name, and then after, and then as hope would build and hope would die, and going through and all of the things that you go through when you love someone who's caught in the disease of addiction, I was at peace with walking away because I felt like I was making that decision from a place of wholeness, not a place of brokenness. It was not what I wanted to do. But I will tell you that all the way through, my heart's desire and my goal was never, I'm going to stay no matter what. My heart's desire and my goal was that this relationship and this man could be healed.
Right.
And so it's every situation is different. Every marriage is different. If there had been some circumstances, if there had been any kind of physical abuse or any kind, I wouldn't have had the option to stay and see if it would work. That never was a part of our story. It's a part of a lot of people's story in addiction. But I knew the only thing that could reach him, it was past me being able to appeal to something in him, woman to man, husband to wife to husband. That was long gone by the time we were at the very end. There wasn't anything I could see him in his eyes that reminded me of who he used to be. But there was a part of me that refused to believe that that's who he was at his core. I knew who he was at his core.
Right.
At his core, he was a spirit man. I knew that, but I was past the point that I could reach that. And so my prayer to God was, you're the only thing that can touch that in him. And I'm asking you to do it. But I didn't feel compelled, and I didn't feel that I had to necessarily be around to see it. I wanted to, but I didn't know. I knew that it was in Russ's hands, whether he would pursue health and wholeness or not after he got out of Santa Fe. I saw enough of a change in him that when he came home that I decided to stay. But I will tell you, one of the things about addiction, when you love someone with addiction, it makes you doubt yourself. It makes you doubt your gut. It makes you doubt that voice inside that I believe is the Holy Spirit, because your heart and your gut are telling you one thing, but your eyes and the person that you love the most are telling you something else. And it's very maddening, and it knocks you off balance, so that I didn't trust my gut. I would think things were good. I'd find out they weren't. I would think that we're making progress. We would have 10 years of sobriety. I would be lulled into a sense of, that, thank goodness that's behind us. And then it would rear its head again. So after Santa Fe, I have a brother that, one of my brothers, he lives in Nashville, and he's a psychologist, which is handy. We knew we'd need him, so we grew our own. But he was somebody who was also in a 12-step program. He had been married to someone with addiction. And I doubted my own instincts so much that I called my brother Matt and said, Matt, I'm staying for now, for today. But I don't trust my ability to discern what I need to do next. So I want to ask you something as my brother and as my friend. If you see me staying in this marriage for a reason that's not whole, that's not healthy, if you see me staying because I think I can fix it, or if I can, would you tell me? And he said, yes, I will. And so at that point, I had to trust somebody else's gut feeling more than my own. And after I call it the benediction from Pastor Jones, it was healing, but it wasn't that kind of instantaneous, we're going to put hands on you and pray and you'll never be an alcoholic again. When he was first diagnosed, we were looking for that healing.
Sure.
That one didn't come. The one that came was step by step, person by person, place by place. And after Santa Fe, to me, Pastor Jones was the benediction. Pastor Jones was God with skin on him, saying the things that Russ's father couldn't say. And after that, after we got home from Mark's, day by day, step by step, we just were leaning in towards each other a little bit. And it gradually, and not even in a big dramatic way, we continued in therapy. We continued trying to recover on our separately and together. And there came a point in which it was a moot point to say, can I stay today? Because I was in it. And step by step, that's what our restoration looked like. It looked like taking the kids to school. It looked like going to the grocery store. It looked like talking to each other late at night about the day. It was healing.
But what I loved about Tori is that when you're the one that's messed up, when you're the one that caused all this chaos, when you're the one that has been caught, and it would be so easy for, as we would argue about stuff like all adult married people do. There's conflict, and she could have played that card of like, look what you've done, and it would send me back to my corner with my head down. But she chose never to bring it up in an accusing way, that it was equal footing when we would argue, and she didn't play the trump card that I felt so guilty about. And if she did, what hope is there for me if she's just going to keep reminding me of how bad I was? But she chose to take the high road and allow me to be a part of this without playing that card. It was amazing.
Well, I had no desire to be in a marriage in which I had the moral high hand, just
Right.
because when you're in a marriage with someone or a relationship with someone who's addicted, you're the healthy one by default. But that's not enough. It's a family disease. It's not just that the impaired one gets sober and everything falls into place. When you are in a relationship with someone in addiction, you start having your own trauma. You also start having your own ways of coping that are not functional. You become hyper vigilant. There's so many ways that I needed to get well, and it was my work to do.
Can I jump in here just 1 second?
Sure.
The hardest thing, the thing that broke me so bad was when I realized I was doing to Tori what my dad did to me.
Yeah.
And it broke me. It's like, oh my Lord, I have traumatized her. Now she is a traumatized person, and she knew I've got to work on this. And we both were willing to go. We both were willing to go to therapy. And what can we do to save this?
And what can we do to get better? Individually, it's like I had to relearn and unlearn as many things. Russ had to relearn and unlearn patterns of behavior that you fall into. But my desire was never to have the moral high ground, that I wanted to be able at any time to cut his legs out from under him. I wanted to be in a marriage with a grown-up partner that I respected. And if that wasn't possible, and if I couldn't be in a relationship without doing that, that's on me. And that would be something that I would have to deal with. So every day that he made the choice to do the work, I was making the choice to not only do the work I needed to do for me, but also to acknowledge and appreciate what I saw him doing. And it wasn't, there was a lot of damage done. I wasn't jumping up and down and clapping and throwing myself in his arms because we were wary.
Yes.
And I had worn out my trust. I had worn her out with that.
And I wasn't willing to. I was willing to do a day at a time. There's a reason those 12-step programs say that. Because for 24 hours, that's a manageable bite of time that you feel like, okay, for this 24 hours, I can be in this marriage with my whole heart. And Russ would say, for this 24 hours, I can be sober, I can do the next right thing.
And isn't that what all Jesus asks of any of us anyway? Can any of us do more than that?
Right.
Wow. What? I'm almost at a loss for words here. You guys have been so open and authentic, and I want to share you, Russ, for sharing about the trauma and what healing of that trauma meant for your own getting past addiction, and you, Tori, for being honest that it wasn't just I'm staying regardless, that you were frankly open to God doing what he needed to do with you, regardless of what Russ did. And now for sharing the story about the kind of life that you are able to experience, both of you, because of the grace of Jesus.
Yeah.
Just thank you.
Well, I just want to end by, and thank you for having us, but I want to end by saying that person that I always knew was in there is the person I'm living with today. And I trust him. I love him. And that's what God can do.
Thank you, both of you.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having us.
I pray that blessed you as much as it blessed me. I was moved as I read the book. I was moved as I talked with Russ and Tori. I know you will be as you read the book also. So this is one of those times I'm going to send you to get a book. The link to I Still Believe is in the show notes. It's available on Amazon or wherever books are sold. We'll also have a link to Russ and Tori's website in our show notes. This is one of those stories that is worth taking the time to read, to share, to let God speak to you of His grace. And thank you for being part of our podcast family. Until next time, may God bless you.